2022 is becoming the year of the Micro-ATX case. At the beginning of the year, I reviewed a budget Mustex M-ATX case, and just last month, Fractal came to market with back-to-back releases of the Pop Mini and Meshify 2 Mini, and today we're looking at another Micro-ATX case, the Asus Prime AP201, a 33-liter enclosure with a ton of space for some larger components and dressed on every side in mesh. Does it punch above its $80 price point, or will it fall flat? Let's find out. Hey guys, welcome to Elevated Systems. I'm your host CJ, and this is the Asus Prime AP201 Micro-ATX case. This enclosure has just been released in North America, and I picked this one up on Newegg for about $80 US. I've spent a few days with the case now, pulled it apart, built a few different PC configurations in it, and now it's time to discuss. But before I get into my experience with and thoughts on this case, I'll take you through the specs and features, show you what you can and can't fit in this case. I'll take you through my build notes, including the pros and cons. Due to the uniqueness of this case, we'll do as much testing of the case as is possible, and we'll finish up with my overall conclusions on the value of the AP201. Let's kick it off with the specs and features. The AP201 measures 460 millimeters deep by 205 millimeters wide by 350 millimeters tall for a total volume of 33 liters. The case is compatible with mini ITX and Micro-ATX motherboards, can accommodate CPU coolers up to 170 millimeters, graphics cards up to 338 millimeters, and ATX power supplies up to 180 millimeters. The case comes with just one rear-mounted 120mm fan, but can accommodate two 140mm top-mounted fans in a few different spacing configs, or up to three 120mm fans. Additionally, an up to 360mm radiator or AIO can be top-mounted. An additional two 120mm fans can be added to the bottom of the case in combination with or in place of the fans. Up to three 2.5 SSDs or 3.5-inch storage drives can be installed. There is an additional 2.5-inch SSD tray behind the motherboard. There are three Velcro straps, multiple tie-down points, and up to 32 millimeters of space for cable management. The front I/O includes a 10 gigabit Type-C port, individual 3.5mm headphone and microphone jacks, the power button rimmed with a power indicator light, and two 5 gigabit USB 3.2 Type A ports. The rear of the case includes four bridged PCIe expansion ports, and finally, I saved the best for last. Four sides of the case, left, right, front, and top, are wrapped in powder-coated steel mesh panels. All of these panels feature toolless removal, and while they do easily pop off, they're also firmly enough attached so they won't just fall off. The 1.5mm square mesh gives the case a very unique pixelated look, but doesn't offer much in the way of dust filtration. In fact, the only dust filter is a magnetic filter on the bottom of the case. Now, as always, to really get to know a case, I need to build in the case, and because this case is a little different from the typical M-ATX cases I've reviewed on the channel, I modified the standard hardware build I typically use in case reviews, but I'll cover those changes when I get to the components, and I'll start the build notes where I started the build, the PSU installation. The AP201 features a front-mounted power supply bracket that's removed to install the PSU and can be reattached in three different heights depending on the length of the power supply. I mounted it in the lowest position, which gave me plenty of room above for the front I/O cables and for the 360 AIO I'll be using. You can remove the inner panel to install the PSU, but I found it wasn't necessary. However, I initially installed the PSU with the front fan facing the front to pull in the cool air, but because of the position and orientation of the power receptacle on my Corsair power supply, the case power pass-through cable wouldn't fit, so I had to flip the PSU. Instead of the usual tower cooler, I used the top-mounted 360mm AIO, and it was necessary to remove the inner panel to fit this. I also mounted it with the tubes facing the front of the case, as the tubes interfered with the rear fan the other way around. There's also plenty of clearance between the AIO and the RAM, with almost 30 millimeters to spare, so you can fit a fat 40mm radiator up there if you want to. There's ample room and plenty of cutouts for cable pass-through to the motherboard, and the seemingly unorganized mass of mounting holes in the bottom of the case are actually labeled on the bottom so you can figure out exactly where to mount drives or fans. There is a mounting point for a hard drive or SSD on the front of the case. However, to use it, the PSU does have to be mounted in the highest position. My 2-slot 280mm RTX 6700 XT fit with plenty of room to spare. However, there's only about 32mm between the bottom fans and the card, so a bottom mounted radiator would only be practical with a single slot card. As far as cable management, while this is by no means as difficult as many ITX small form factor cases, it does still require a bit of pre-planning and patience. I used a semi-modular PSU, so I only used the cables I absolutely needed. Also, the cables on the CX750M are pretty flexible, which helps. I was also able to get all the cables, including the daisy-chained fan and RGB cables, to fit tightly behind the motherboard in the cable management area without filling the inside of the PC area with much visible excess. It did require the use of every included zip tie, however. Also, you do need to ensure you don't route cables along the bottom edge of the case, as it'll block the lip on the side panel, preventing reinstallation. It worked out okay for me, but if this was a permanent build, I would definitely use a fully modular PSU and build out some custom cables exactly the right length. I'd also probably use a simple fan and RGB hub so I could more strategically route and place the fan cables. When I first started the PC, the rear fan didn't light up, and I had to pull most of my cable management apart to find the disconnected cable. Other than spending a few extra minutes on cable management, this build went together very easily in the Asus case, and in the end, the PC looks great. I'm typically not a huge fan of a lot of RGB, but I did use a lot here, and I think the diffused lighting through the mesh with the underglow from the bottom fans is a classy implementation of the lighting. The AP201 has a lot of strengths and, to be honest, not many weaknesses. It's compact but still big enough to hold large components without a bunch of wasted space. In fact, stepping down to an ITX build, a creative builder will find plenty of room in here for even a custom water-cooled build. It's easy to work in, the pixelated mesh surrounding the entire closure, the way the mesh flows around the front panel, and the good build quality and tight panel tolerances, and the lack of any big branding gives the case a really clean look. There are other small form factor cases with this general style. The Cooler Master NR200 comes to mind, but Asus really took it up a notch. Now, if I really get nitpicky, I can find some needs improvements. The case only comes with one fan. That's not really bad at the $80 price point. Most builders looking at this are probably going to select their own fans and even replace the rear fan like I did. And the 3 Inwin Luna AL120s I use only cost about $30, so it brings the price up to about even with something like the NR200. Also, depending on the components you select, you may not necessarily need extra fans. At full load, the 6700 XT maxed out at just 77 degrees, and the i7-12700F only hit 67 degrees. With this build, I could easily just use the stock fan. The large triple fan Gigabyte WindForce GPU cooler can easily pull in all the fresh air it needs through the side and bottom of the case, especially with the over 1 inch of bottom clearance on this case. And the 360 AIO can pull cool air right through the mesh side panel, but the open mesh does mean dust buildup. Even with the 2 bottom filtered intake fans I'm using, the airflow of this build is still on the negative side, so it will need regular cleaning. Also, why I understand why they didn't include a 3rd fan mounting point under the PSU where it could get caught up in the cabling. I think experienced builders could effectively plan and add a 3rd bottom fan without a problem. The only other really nitpicky thing I have is the motherboard cutout is a little too big. It's fine for an MATX board, but ITX boards look a bit awkward. Reducing the size of the cutout and adding a second set of pass-throughs to correspond to the ITX form factor would be a cleaner look, I think. Now, really, none of those cons were really cons, just things I think would make a really good case even better. Ultimately, I think the Asus Prime AP201 is a great value MATX case and punches well above its $80 price point. That's if you can find it. It appears I wasn't the only one waiting for this to hit the North American market, and as of filming, the black version is on back order on Newegg, but the white version seems to still be in stock. But for current availability and pricing, check the links in the description below. I'll update those as the case becomes available from other retailers. If you have any questions about the case, please ask in the comments below, and be sure to hit that like and maybe subscribe while you're down there, and I'll see you in the next one.